Today we're going to be talking about oxalates, what they are, where they come from, and how they can sometimes cause health problems like kidney stones and joint pain. What are oxalates? Oxalates are organic compounds that are found in many of the plant foods we commonly eat. Our bodies can also produce oxalates internally through certain metabolic pathways. Normally, some of the oxalates we consume in our diet will bind with calcium and get excreted through the intestines. The remainder can be absorbed into the bloodstream and eventually get filtered out by the kidneys to be excreted in the urine. For our bodies to remain healthy, the levels of oxalates need to stay in balance, with the amount being produced and taken in through diet matching the amount being metabolized and excreted. If something throws this balance off, that's when oxalates can start to cause problems for some people, which we'll discuss more in a moment. Sources of oxalates. As mentioned, one source of oxalates is the foods we eat. Many fruits and vegetables contain oxalates, with some being very high in oxalates, while others only have trace amounts. Examples of high oxalate foods include spinach, rhubarb, beets, chocolate, wheat bran, and nuts. When we eat high oxalate plants, our gut bacteria help break down and eliminate some of the oxalates before they are absorbed. The mineral calcium can also bind to oxalates in the intestines and prevent their absorption. So consuming calcium-rich foods like dairy, along with high oxalate foods, may reduce how much is absorbed. In addition to diet, our bodies also produce oxalates endogenously as byproducts when we metabolize certain compounds. It's estimated that this internal production by the liver accounts for 50–80% of the total oxalates in the body, with dietary intake making up the remaining portion. Some key precursors our cells can use to synthesize oxalates include the amino acids hydroxyproline and glycine, carbohydrate derivatives like glycolate, glyoxylate, and glyoxyl. Elimination of oxalates. So we've covered where oxalates come from. Now let's look at how the body gets rid of them to maintain balance. As mentioned, when we consume oxalate-containing foods, the beneficial bacteria in our gut, especially one called Oxalobacter formigenes, can break down a significant portion of the oxalates so they don't get absorbed. The more of this good bacteria we have, the less likely we are to absorb too many oxalates from our diet. What does get absorbed moves into the bloodstream and eventually gets filtered out by the kidneys. In the kidney tubules, oxalates can bind with calcium to form small calcium oxalate crystals. If levels get too high, problems can occur. More on that in a moment. The amino acid hydroxyproline is another important factor in oxalate production and excretion. Hydroxyproline is found in high amounts in collagen, the main protein in connective tissues like skin, tendons, bones, and cartilage. When collagen gets broken down, the hydroxyproline can be metabolized in the liver and kidneys to form glyoxylate, which can then be further metabolized. Normally, an enzyme called AGT rapidly converts glyoxylate into the amino acid glycine. But if there are problems with this enzyme, glyoxylate levels can build up and get converted into oxalates instead. Problems caused by high oxalate levels. If the delicate balance of oxalate intake, production, and excretion gets disrupted, levels can rise and cause problems. The most well-known issue is kidney stones. About 80% of kidney stones are composed of calcium oxalate crystals that form when there is too much oxalate in the kidneys. Kidney stones affect about 12% of men and 5% of women at some point during their lives. Even if full-blown stones don't form, high oxalate levels can cause the formation of tiny nanocrystals in the urine, which may be a precursor to stones for some people. Diet plays a direct role. One study found that a high oxalate diet rapidly increased the formation of these crystals, while a low oxalate diet decreased them. Another problem that can crop up with high oxalates, although more rarely, is deposits of oxalate crystals in other tissues, like the joints, skin, and retina. This can trigger inflammation and joint pain, essentially a form of arthritis. This is most often seen in people with genetic disorders that cause them to produce way too many oxalates. But the increasing prevalence of leaky gut syndrome may allow more dietary oxalates into the bloodstream to settle in the joints. Genetic susceptibility. Researchers have identified several key genes involved in oxalate metabolism, and variations in these genes can significantly impact a person's susceptibility to developing high oxalate levels and related problems like kidney stones. The most serious are a group of genetic disorders called primary hyperoxaluria, or PH. These are characterized by defects in the enzymes that normally break down glyoxylate and other oxalate precursors. PH type 1 involves a defect in AGXT, the enzyme that converts glyoxylate to glycine. PH type 2 involves a defect in GRHPR, another enzyme in the glyoxylate pathway. And PH type 3 is caused by mutations in HOGA1, which breaks down hydroxyproline into pyruvate and glyoxylate. All three forms of PH lead to major oxalate buildup and a very high risk of recurring kidney stones starting from childhood. Conclusion. In summary, oxalates are important compounds in plants and in the human body that require a delicate balance. We get some from our diet and we produce some internally. Normally, they get excreted safely, but if levels get too high in the body, it can lead to health issues like kidney stones and even a type of arthritis. Genetic susceptibility plays a role for some people, but diet is also an important factor. If oxalates are a concern, limiting intake of high oxalate foods and eating more calcium-rich foods may be beneficial. Of course, anyone with symptoms should consult their healthcare provider for proper diagnosis and treatment. We'll explore more about this in the Life Hack section.